Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. Roll the lore to fill your week. I'm Lore, your Laura. Actually, I've been thinking recently, and this is just because I'm weird and silly and stupid, of different words that I could affix lore to. Like, we've already done overlore, or warlore. But I was wondering, like, what other words we could affix lore to, where it fits, like, you know, in place of the word lord, for example. The overlore. Lore in waiting is one that came up as well, which I like that idea. So I'm going to cover like a bunch of little things that I don't think are fully newsworthy really quick right at the beginning here. First of all, there's a game out there that I want to raise awareness of called Mighty Gunvolt and Burst. It's on the Switch, and it is a game that you should buy. I actually wish I had time to really cover it or showcase it or whatever. I might actually do an exploration of it just to showcase it. Basically, imagine if Mighty Number 9 was good, and that's that. First thing I want to talk about. Second of all, I wasn't able to find a lot more information about this one, so I couldn't really comment on it. But apparently, Star Trek Discovery, that new show that's going to be terrible, God, I hope it's not terrible, is also coming out on Netflix, but near as I can tell, is only coming out on Netflix in the UK. So, I'm not sure what to do about that. Second point, again, just rapid firing these. We have confirmation now that, at least as far as scheduling goes, the new Metroid game, as in Metroid Prime 4, not the one that's coming out in a few months, the new Kirby game, which they showcased at E3, and the new Yoshi game, which they actually played at the new E3, are all going to be coming out next year. Cool. I just thought I'd comment on it. Also, for those of you not aware, there's a game out there called Homeworld Cataclysm, which is at the very least tied for my favorite Homeworld game of the four, tied with Deserts of Karak, for anybody who's curious, and is awesome, and I praised the hell out of when we were doing our stream of the Homeworld series some months ago. That game has finally, for the first time ever, been released in digital format over on Good Old Games, and I highly recommend you go pick it up because it's awesome. They had to rename it to Homeworld Emergence, I think. I'm still trying to get used to the new name. But anyways, it's not called Cataclysm, it's called Emergence, so you should totally go pick that up. Seriously, no, really, it's an awesome game. I could talk about the legal issues there and the rumors cycling around about how it became available and all that, but honestly, all that's just, you know, lack of information. The good news is we got the game moving on. Skull and Bones. I actually want to quote something word for word for this. Skull and Bones is a game that caught my attention during E3. It's basically Assassin's Creed 4, the ship game, and that sounds absolutely amazing to me. The quote, the direct quote, which I want to read word for word here, which is why I'm doing it, is Skull and Bones will offer a narrative campaign which will be integrated into the game and will not be something aside of the multiplayer experience. In this campaign, players will encounter iconic characters, memorable rival pirates. More details will be shared at a later date. And then, with regards to the... no, it isn't. I mean, we're like 2 minutes early, Kelson, but that's it. We only showed Loot Hunt, which is one of our PvP modes, in Disputed Waters. We want to say that this is just the tip of the iceberg for what we have to show for Skull and Bones, which is not coming out until next autumn, apparently. As in, when I say next autumn, I mean 2018, so we got a ways to wait for that. I kind of already talked about the Take-Two legal thing. I kind of already ranted about it. I kind of already talked about how it wasn't just wrong, but it was understandable, and I dedicated a whole section of last week's Lore Week specifically to the Take-Two anti-mods policy. This is a direct quote. This is the legalese that Take-Two has put forth. I want to make this clear, by the way. This is Take-Two backing down, but I want to read you the exact agreement they wrote, because this agreement means they could still prosecute if they wanted to. And I quote, After discussions with Take-Two, Take-Two has agreed it will generally not take legal action against third-party projects involving Rockstar's PC games, just Rockstar, that are single-player, non-commercial, and respect the IP of third parties. This does not apply to multiplayer online services, tools, files, libraries, or functions that could be used to impact multiplayer online services, use or importation of other IP, including other Rockstar IP, in the project. That's a lot of legal stretching room in that statement. But at least they decided to back off on the shall we say, excessively hard stance that they were taking, where they were basically saying, yeah, no, we're going to take you to court over this crap. We'll see where that goes. It is actually well within possibility, unfortunately, that they could be doing this as a first step to establish a legal case. Moving on. I talked about Mighty Golden Vote, Star Trek, Metroid, Homeworld, Skull and Bones. Only one more thing to talk about. This is actually going to get a real section. Oh, right, before I actually go forward, I do want to say that I don't have any real Grey 17s this week. I'm very sad. Except for one. I have two Grey 17s. Sorry, I guess I just lied. But this has been a very slow week for Grey 17s. Like, for example, I had one person who ranted at me for mispronouncing Qui-Gon in my Episode 1 rumination. But, I mean, I was actually mispronouncing Qui-Gon, or Qui-Gon, or however you're supposed to say it, so, you know, that was legit. I was actually mispronouncing it. Although it was funny because he says that Darth Maul is by no means a Dark Jedi. He is clearly a Sith. I'm pretty sure, although I could be wrong, that I actually defined how I was using those words in that thing, and he just decided to ignore my my definitions. But that's okay. That's okay. Doesn't really qualify as a Grey 17. I also had someone argue with me the merits of backing of currency. He's fundamentally and provably wrong, but that's not a Grey 17. That's just someone who disagrees, and it would lead to a discussion. And honestly, I don't think you guys want to talk about the backing of currency, do you? But I do want to talk about one other thing, and that is that I want to have a timestamp. Where's my timestamps? Where's my timestamps? Oh, they are. Okay. Timestamps. Man, I've only had a 6-minute intro. Didn't I have something else to talk about? I guess not. Oh! Right. Hang on. No, I do actually have 2 Grey 17s. I forgot about this. Sorry. God, this is the second time I've forgotten. I even write these down. So the first Grey 17. This is in response to a comment about Half-Life 2 being a good game. This isn't actually a Grey 17 directed at me, but another commenter, but still qualifies. This comment is, and I quote, "There have been about 4 video games ever of interest to anyone who isn't a teenage boy. Getting a really strong move isn't character development. Hitting people isn't highbrow." This was in response to the idea that Half-Life 2 is not actually... basically, that there's no character development or there's no story focus when it comes to games. Except for those 4. However, I have had a second Grey 17 this week. This is a groundbreaking Grey 17. And I quote, "You're stinky." Anyways. Make a couple notes there really quick. Alright, let's talk about real news. This is going to be a long one. We've got a couple of real issues to talk about, and I gotta be honest, I actually spent most of my morning doing due diligence on this because there's a lot to talk about, and to be completely blunt, what I'm going to be telling you is still going to be, in some parts, presumption. So, why don't we just start with the simple stuff? Right, so, first thing I want to talk about is the fact that Crusader Kings 2 has its final DLC coming out. Woo! We know about this. This is something they've talked about before, and they want to do something, you know, special for the final CK2 DLC. What is there to talk about Konami? I don't have Konami on my list at all. They're going to be pushing out their final DLC, and theoretically, all the people who are currently working on that dev team will be shunted somewhere else. We're not sure where. No information on where. However, what is interesting is that several developers, including one from EU4, have been transferred over to CK2 in order to work on this final DLC. Now, actually, I think that's a good sign. I think they're really trying to focus on making the last one, you know, really, really good. But I'm very curious what they're going to do next, because there's a lot of possibilities. I mean, expansion of Stellaris' DLC library, expansion of HOI 4's DLC library, making on a new game, you know, putting out Victoria 3, which is, as I've said before, the most likely continuation of their big 3, or big 4, excuse me. Lots of possibilities there. I find it No, she is not Velvedrix, because I don't feel like touching crazy today. If y'all want to hear about Alex Muir, I don't know how to pronounce her name, and I don't care, go look at Jim Sterling. I'm not even going to talk about her. So, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about with regards to this. First of all, the main topic here is the variance between financial feasibility and doing something good. I don't know how else to say that. Let me put it to you this way. Anyone remember Sims 3? I do. I actually really liked Sims 3. Great game. I say that without hesitation, without exaggeration. I actually really liked playing Sims 3. It was a great game. And I really enjoyed going through it. I really enjoyed a lot of the DLC, because there's basically two categories of DLCs for Sims 3, I'll let you know right now. There's stuff packs, which just includes like new stuff you can buy, you know, new housing items or new cars or whatever, which isn't really my thing, but neat or whatever. And then there's what are basically mini expansions, which add new mechanics, new modes, new people you can play as, new jobs, that kind of a thing, new areas to live in, new neighborhoods. And so there's a lot of DLC to Sims 3. Now, it does go on sale periodically, so that does help. Problem is, when Sims 4 came out, it had basically none of that. Now, I ranted about this when Sims 4 came out. I was like, oh my god. Yeah, I talked about that last week, Ethel. Sims 3. I ranted about that because from our perspective, from the perspective of, you know, the players, buying a sequel to a game which is absent so many of the features of the previous game is just kind of eyebrow-raising, you know? I mean, ignore the financial thing, ignore the business, ignore the reality of developing the game. Look at us, the gamers, for a second. I want to pick a game you like. I don't care what it is, just have it in your head. I mean, I do care what it is, but you know, think of a game you like, okay? Now imagine that game has had multiple really good expansions, not DLCs, that have really fleshed it out. Add mechanics, add depth, add complexity. It's a much better game than it was at launch. See Neverwinter Nights with its 2 expansions for a great example of the expansion effect in this case. Now, I want to sell you on a new game that's absent all those new features and mechanics. It's basically just the base game again. Are you going to be inclined to buy that? Now, obviously, this is actually kind of a per-case basis thing. Maybe I've built up enough consumer trust that you believe that I'll make something happen. Maybe you think that maybe you're just such a fan that you want to try out, you know, the next iteration or whatever. Maybe you have issues playing the old version. Cough, Darkest Hour, cough. But yeah, like those are probably exceptions. And as I see, people are starting to say in chat, no. And I'm basically in the same boat. Again, case by case, but my automatic inclination is no. Why would I do that? But the problem here is, while that is so obvious to us as gamers, it presents an interesting problem for them. Now, there are people who've tried to make this work in the past, and the problem is there's no way getting around this. It is a development nightmare, because you have a couple of options. Option 1, you can go ahead and sit down and say, I'm going to take all of these new... I'm going to take all of these mechanics, concepts, new features that were added in DLCs and expansions in the old game, put them in the new game, in the vanilla new game, with some new stuff over here. Civilization 6 came close to this, actually, by being, at vanilla, about as good a game as Civ 5 was with everything added in. Now, that's, of course, going to be down to opinion, and Civ 6 hasn't really kept going like it needed to yet. Fingers crossed. Come on, Civ 6. But, you know, that's the kind of idea. Try to put that over. Of course, that is a hellacious amount of work, because now not only are you making a sequel, you're making a sequel with all that stuff from the previous game, which is going to severely bloat the development time. Unless you're using the exact same engine as you were, which can cause its own issues. Like, for example, let's say right now they make Crusader Kings 3. And so here's Crusader Kings 3. If they try to add all the stuff from years of CK2 being added into CK3, they're going to have to spend tons of time and effort and work in developing it. Or they're going to have to use the same damn engine, which at that point, to be 100% blunt, why even make a CK3? the engine is one of the biggest problems with CK2, and it is old and it is clunkety. Its multiplayer has hellacious issues. It has crash issues. There are certain graphics cards it simply does not work with. You have to disable certain types of programs to get it running at all. You know, if we're going to have all the old problems, why even bother, right? Or you could do basically the easy thing, which is what most companies actually do. Hey, here's this is made up example. You know, here's CK3. It's just like CK2 was at vanilla. And then we'll start releasing DLC for it over time. In fact, people can argue quite logically that Paradox has already done this with Hearts of Iron 4, which, by all accounts, is an inferior game to Darkest Hour, despite the fact that it's a more modern game and it doesn't cause me to rip my throat out trying to just get it to run at all. Right? This is all theoretical and hypothetical, but it does. I bring this up because it presents an interesting and kind of a no-win scenario for developers. I'm not saying that I necessarily, like, sympathize with the company, but I feel like the poor developers, I look at them just like, oh my god. Because what do you do? Whoops. Right, I need to mute that. What do you do under those circumstances? Do you put out a Sims 4, which is something that actually did that? Do you put out Sims 4 and just hope? Do you try to port everything over and burn yourself out trying to develop this monster thing? Do you try to make it in the same vein so you can port everything for? Now, this is something that a couple companies have tried to do, by the way. I actually can't think off the top of my head when I was looking into this. I couldn't think of a good example of this that succeeded. Please feel free to come up with one if you guys can. But there have been a couple of companies that have tried to make, this is a fake example, Sims 4 with the majority of the mechanics from Sims 3 literally ported over. Like, they made Sims 4, and then they started, like, as a separate development cycle, started porting over DLC from Sims 3, either as paid or free. You know, if like, for example, if you already bought it for Sims 3, you'd get it for Sims 4. Again, made-up example because EA didn't actually do that, but I've seen companies try to do that. And I've never seen a company actually succeed at that kind of model, though. But it does present a problem, because when you have a game that you're still producing DLC for, what, 5 years later now? Where do you go from that? Do you just keep producing DLC forever as the game just gets slowly more and more out of date? At some point or another, the Band-Aid has to be ripped on this kind of a situation like Paradox has. And so the idea of them pushing out a final DLC makes sense to me, because at some point they need to look at this and be like, okay, we need to rip the Band-Aid off. I'm really, really curious what they're going to do next. I just wanted to kind of discuss this topic in general, because as with most things we're going to be talking about today, it's more complicated than it looks at first glance. But again, we always have to keep in mind all of the perspectives. Per exemple, we're gamers, we don't want to buy Sims 4 without Sims 3. I mean, we just talked about that, right? Now, granted, Sims 4 was actually a really bad example, but whatever. This brings me to my next topic. Paradox. Oh, that sucks, Mendar. See you around. By the way, hi, everyone. I'm sorry I didn't say hi. I actually have a lot of big topics to talk about this week, and I'm not even talking about what's-her-face. Okay. I want to make this clear that I am not excusing Paradox or taking their side. Let's start with that. Because I've noticed in the past that when I try to be reasonable or try to see multiple perspectives on a situation, I'm accused of taking sides, or I'm accused of being like, oh, you're just an insert company here fanboy who is an apologist, which has been tossed around a lot in the last few years as an insult. Oh, by the way, this is off topic. I apparently am autistic, according to the internet. Every week I learn something new about myself. I just thought I'd share that. That's funny. I already did, Zwan. I did within a few minutes of it going live last Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever. Anyways, Paradox. First of all, let's make this clear. I in no way think that this is my opinion, of course. I in no way think that Paradox saw the Steam Summer Sale coming and decided, oh, people are going to buy our DLCs, we better raise the prices on them. Every single bit of information I've seen about the subject has indicated to me that that is not the case. First of all, companies have tried to do that in the past, and that doesn't really work out that well. Second of all, and this is actually far more important, I actually have a theory that the timing of this was either completely coincidental or was being done at this point to help mitigate the impact. But I'm getting off topic. Let's actually rewind a little bit. For those of you not aware, Paradox decided to rebalance, I think is the best word to use here, pricing of a lot of their products and DLCs worldwide. Now, in most places and in most cases, this means the prices went up. Now, I phrase that very specifically because most people are reporting this as Paradox raises prices, rather than Paradox is rebalancing prices based on global economy. Let's discuss this as bluntly as fairly as possibly can. Different currencies for different regions vary in value on a day-to-day basis, usually only by a few cents or equivalent, but that is something that is very normal and very common. When major political upheaval happens, like has been happening the last year, no politics. But that does affect the economy. That does affect the value of the pound. That does affect the value of the lira, and so forth and so on. And so it is actually exceptionally normal to the point of mundane for companies to charge more or less based on the relative value of currency within the region it's in. How many people out there, how many times have I heard someone who is in Australia is a great example, complain about the price of their games there, or Brazil is actually another one. Brazil and Australia are the two I hear most often, about how expensive the games are for them because of that exact value. Now, there are other things that come into account, but there is no avoiding the fact that since we live in a global economy without one currency going universally across it, every currency is being balanced against each other, and therefore there's a median line and everything else is just evening it out compared to others. Make sense? So this is normal. That part right there is important to get across first, because what Paradox is doing is still kind of scummy and crummy, but it's not the fact that they were raising prices, and it's not the fact that they were adjusting for local inflation. That's fine. That's, again, normal, and to be blunt, makes perfect sense. You need the same relative value from each particular sale. Let me just explain this really quick, because I know not everyone who follows me is big into economics. If I have a fork, and this fork is worth 5 cents to me, but your rupees, because you're in Zelda, are worth, one of your rupees is worth 5 of my cents. So obviously, if I'm going to sell this to you, I'm going to sell this to you for 1 rupee. Because I eat at my table, Django. Anyways, so that makes sense, right? Now let's say the value of the rupee to the cent changes. Well, now let's say 2 rupees are worth 5 cents. So I go to you and I say, I'll sell you this fork, but it's going to cost you 2 rupees instead of 1. Because that's how much this fork is worth. The fork itself hasn't actually changed, right? The value hasn't changed. It's just the value of your currency relative to my currency has changed, and I am valuing this based on my currency. Make sense? I know this is a really simple explanation. I'm not trying to treat you guys like you're idiots. I just want to make this clear, because that's not the problem. Now, the problem is that Paradox's DLCs don't go on sale except for Steam Summer Sales and the like. The problem is that Paradox is still charging $20 or $10 or $30 for stuff that came out a year or 3 ago. The problem is that they don't understand what depreciation means. This is probably actually one of my biggest problems with Paradox, at least as far as a publishing company is concerned. The fact that they don't seem to comprehend that things should slowly go down in price, because that's how the video game market works. Yes, but Django, of course, is trying to distract me from the issue, because Django is very much on the side. Django is clearly a Paradox fanboy. See, that's what people accuse me of all the time. It drives me crazy. No, Django is not a Paradox fanboy. But he is distracting from the issue, which is the fact that they have not actually been lowering the prices of these things over time. It's pretty much straight up with another company that, as much as I love their products, drives me batty. Nintendo. When I bought Zelda Twilight Princess, my own GameCube copy, it cost me $70. That was years after that game came out. Because Nintendo games don't tend to lower in price over time. Now, that's obviously not a universally true thing, but there are plenty of Nintendo games that, and Pax and I have had this rule for years, if you're going to buy a Nintendo game, you need to just buy it. You need to just buy it and accept the expense, because statistically speaking, it's not going to go, it's not going to decrease in price like other games do, right? Now, of course, there are such a thing as collector's items or limited print runs. You know, we all know what happened with Suikoden or Suikoden 2, right? You know, where getting a hold of a copy was insane, and therefore rarity increased the value of the price. But that's a separate thing. That's over there in the corner. That's not related to, like, if you go to a dealership right now and buy a Nissan and drive it off the lot and drive it around for a couple of years and go back, you're not going to get the same value for that. If you go out and buy a Spada or something like that, then it might actually do that. It might actually raise in price or stay at the same price. But video games as, I said I can't think of the word, I want to say futures, but it's actually wrong. Anyways, whatever. Video games don't generally do that unless it's like a special edition or it's a limited value commodity. Commodity, that was the word I was going to go. Thank you. That is actually the word I was going for. Video games as a commodity generally skyrocket down in value. The only exceptions are, supply and demand, or because of rarity, or like, for example, if I was to try and sell a Nintendo Switch, or not Nintendo Switch, excuse me, a Nintendo emulator box. I can't think of what it's called all of a sudden. The NES Classic, that was it. The NES Classic right now, that would be very expensive, not because of the limited demand, right? I just want to really circle the wagons on this one, because I want to make my point clear that looking at Paradox, looking at their DLCs, looking at what they're producing, looking at their commodities, those things should be in price. They should. The only two explanations I can come up with for why they have not are thusfold. One, if I was to give them the benefit of the doubt, it's because they still need to keep making money, and that is accounting for a large amount of their income, because of people like, to be blunt, myself. I actually bought 2 DLCs from Paradox just this last week on Steam Summer Sale, despite knowing all of this, because I want them, because I like them. These were the... I don't remember, the Mandate of Heaven or something like that, and Third Realm are the 2 I bought. So maybe, and I don't know, I don't have access to their financial records, but maybe there's a decent chunk of their money that is still, to this day, coming in from that, and therefore they don't want to reduce that money because that's where their income's coming from. Or, and this is the second option, greed. Just straight up simple greed. To put it bluntly, let's go back to our fork analogy really quick. Okay? Let's say that I want to charge you $10 for this fork, and that's ridiculous, right? But let's say you buy it. In fact, let's go further and say enough people buy this fork so that I just keep the price at $10. The market cannot endure if people do not buy it. That is literally how economics works. The flow of fungible currency or goods or services. That is how an economy works, right? So in other words, if I am at the point where people aren't buying enough of these forks, I have 2 options. Go out of business, or lower the price. And the fact that they have not gone out of business and not lowered their price means to me that either enough people are buying them, or they see no reason to lower the price. Make sense? So, I'm sorry, we're going to be talking about economics again later this Loreweek. I apologize, guys. It's going to be really dry and boring, and I'm going to try and get it as interesting as I can. It has to do with Star Citizen. We'll get there. Moving on. Speaking of which, though, speaking of market and economics, I know, I'm sorry, guys. I'm so boring. Let's talk about Blizzard. Let's talk about the Necromancer, which is going live for Diablo 3 this coming Tuesday, June 27th. And it's going to be $15. Now, before I discuss the complexities of this, before I go into the realities of this and the perspectives of this, I want to ask very simply... Oh god, I meant to do that earlier. I want to ask very simply, You know what? Hang on. Actually, let me redo this. Hang on. Redo my timestamp. I'm sorry, guys. Let's not talk about Blizzard. Let's talk about a guy who I meant to talk about earlier and I completely spaced. I want to talk about a guy called Geek Crossing. I'm actually going to link him in chat here really quick. And again, anybody who's watching this on the YouTube VOD or whatever can just find him on YouTube. It's called Geek Crossing. He's a guy who's basically just started, from what I can tell, as far as YouTube. He does reviews of other YouTube channels, and he does his reviews in the style of those YouTube channels. He came across my radar because he did a review of me, which I admit was just kind of... I was actually watching my niece when that happened, and I'm like, oh, hey, I need to... Hey, kiddo, I need to watch this really quick, because I had no idea what was going on with this. And it's like if you want to watch the review of me, it's like a 14-minute and 5-second video. I'm looking at it right now. And I do recommend you to check it out. He actually does do some decent stuff, and I have watched some of his other videos, and I do generally recommend you at least give him a shout out. I wanted to plug him. I wanted people to be aware of this guy, because he does some decent stuff. And the end, I suppose. Yes, I'm reviewing his review of my review. Shut up, Absol. Okay, I'm sorry. I really wanted to talk about that at the beginning. I apologize. I completely spaced because I'm really, really tired. No, yeah, like I said, I liked his stuff, Gnarlex. That's why I'm giving him a shout-out. This is not plugging him because he reviewed me. That's just what brought him to my attention. I watched some of other stuff. I'm like, yeah, okay. I admit the intro to his video made me go, huh? And then it got to the video part. I'm like, oh, okay. Anyways, now let's talk about Blizzard. Let me readjust the timestamp here. I gotta write it like down here because I'm out of room on my freaking notepad. My notepad is so full this week. Let's talk about Blizzard. So, June 27th, this Tuesday, they're coming out with the Necromancer, which is $15. Now, before I go in more in depth into this, gut reaction, go. And now I will change the song, because this shouldn't even be on this playlist, actually. I'm a little confused why it is. Hey, Dakota. By the way, we'll be playing Stellaris today. Yes, new Diablo 3 hero. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of responses in chat that I was expecting. Now, let's go ahead and discuss a few things here. What, Corrales? No, Corrales. Excuse me. So, let's talk about this. First of all, I am going to buy it. It's hard to... I know a lot of players, people in general, don't understand the value of things, and I don't mean that as an insult, it's just true. The amount of time and effort and work and art department and development time and coding time and QA time and rehash time and polish time that goes into releasing a new character to Diablo 3 is actually huge to a game like that. It is a huge investment on their part. So for that reason alone, $15 doesn't bother me, assuming the quality is high, and everything I've seen has indicated the quality is in fact high. Getting value of effort put into. I mean, if they lowered the price, which they very well may do later on, and in fact this is Blizzard, their stuff goes on sale all the time, actually. Like Paradox, they understand how to lower their prices over time. It wouldn't surprise me that happens. But I will be buying it day one, not only because I think it's worth the value, but because I do actually want to support them on this, because I understand that they spent a lot of time and effort over the course of about a year working on this. First point. Second point, now this is actually interesting. Pax and I were talking about this. We're actually getting some free content alongside the Necromancer. Now this content you don't have to pay for or do anything for. It's just free. Boom, you get it. Done. One of the social contracts that game developers sometimes straddle is the idea that you pay for X so that you get X and Y. To give you an example of what I mean by that, I'm going to use myself as an example. My patrons put in money, and streamers donate money so that I can keep making videos. You are not literally buying an episode of mine. You're not. I don't have a like. You put in this much money and you get this extra benefit program. We had a huge discussion about this, and I talked about this and thought about this extensively back when I first got onto Patreon. Instead, it's the social contract. You put in money with the understanding that doing so is what allows me to keep doing what I'm doing, so I will keep producing the content that you are consuming as of this very second, whether you're watching me live or on YouTube. So that's kind of what I mean by the social contract thing. You pay X in order to get Y. You with me? Or to get X and Y, excuse me. So, I wonder how many people think of that in this case. The idea of paying for the Necromancer so that we are effectively also paying for the time and effort and money and coding and budget and art department and everything else that went into the new zones that we're getting and the other new content that's coming out for free. Third thing I want to talk about. I did Keen-Eyed Keith, and indeed, at this point, I actually do need this. There's something. Lore runs are kind of different. Let's just leave that aside for the moment. And I suppose patrons do get to pick ruminations, but that's more of an organizational reward thing than a you're paying for it kind of a thing. Anyways. What was I talking about? Blizzard, Diablo, Necromancer. One of the comments that's brought up rather frequently is, why haven't we had more Diablo content? This is the only Diablo content we've had in about a year and a half, I think, at this point. I mean, they had the brief update with the Herodric Cube thing, and of course they started doing the Seasons thing. And let's be clear, the Seasons thing was a good idea, but we're up to season, like, what, 10 or 11 now? We need something more. Now, we actually have a complicated topic here. I know, it's just the week for complicated topics. But at this point, making a new expansion for Diablo 3 is actually going to be kind of difficult. At this point in time, it might legitimately be easier to make a new game. Now, there's reasons for that, and it has to do with balancing and mechanics and gameplay and all that fun stuff. They would have to basically adjust the way the literal stats and mechanics of the game works right now for an expansion to function. Now, they can do that. We've proven they could do that because they did that with the Reaper expansion. But they would have to do that in order to produce a new expansion, or they could produce Diablo 4. The problem is, and I don't actually have answers on this one, they have just been sitting there and not actually producing much for Diablo 3. Despite the fact that they have, well, I shouldn't call it a good game because that's opinion. They have a very functional and serviceable game with a decent audience, and they're Blizzard, so they have a huge market share of their particular niche. They even have their own marketing subset, basically, and their own convention where they could announce this kind of thing. And yet they haven't really been doing much with Diablo, and I don't really understand why. I've never been able to come up with a really good reason why. But then again, we've had the same problem with StarCraft 2 lately. I'm really not sure what's going on. I mean, granted, they're probably redistributing some resources to Overwatch and Hearthstone because those are making money hand over fist, but that's different development studios. Blizzard has multiple development studios. I mean, there's a few people that share across them, but for the most part, it's this group, this group, this group. Why is this group, the Diablo group, doing so little? Why is the StarCraft 2 group doing so little? Don't have answers. This is the final... The reason this ties into the Necromancer thing is this is the final reason why I'm going to go ahead and buy it day one, $15. Because I want them to do something more. And I know that the only way to get a company's attention, positively or negatively, is money. They will look at the reports. There will be people whose job is to analyze sales and when, this is very important, when those sales came in order to judge relative value. And I am going to go ahead and buy the $15 thing right up front. I'm not saying anyone else has to, but the reason why I'm going to do so, in addition to the previous thing, is because here, boom, I am interested in more Diablo content. Please produce more Diablo content. God damn it. Next point. And as Takoida points out, that's basically just tossing a drop of water into what might be an ocean. You don't know. It's putting your money into a hole. You have no idea how much other money is in that hole, but if enough money is in that hole, then something will work out. However, just to make this point clear, and I hate to keep bringing this up, I did the exact same thing with Final Fantasy XIII on the PC, and that one actually worked out. It's not like it can't work. It has been proven to work in the past, but it's never a guarantee, of course. Okay, let's talk about Mr. Sakaguchi, shall we? Let's talk about Hironobu Sakaguchi. He is one of the names most commonly associated with the Final Fantasy series because he was the lead primary director for Final Fantasy 1 through 5 and was still involved in the Final Fantasies from 6 to 9 in some extent or another. Now, he and his little development studio, whose name I can't even remember right now, are producing a new game called Terra Battle 2, which is apparently a sequel to Terra Battle. This is how amazingly up to date I am on my news. But that's not really what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how Sakaguchi, in my experience and in my interpretation of him as a developer, for lack of a better term, has never been afraid to try new things and experiment and do whatever. I mention this because we know one pretty big point about Terra Battle 2, and that is that it will be a free game with microtransactions to pay for it. It will be a freemium game. Now, Lord knows the term freemium is dragged through the mud, and with good reason. But as I like to point out, just in the interest of using the brain, that does not necessarily automatically mean it is a bad thing. But I would be lying if I didn't say that made me go, oh no, really? Really? You know? Theories? I mentioned the trying new things thing earlier. This could be just Sakaguchi, who is a little bit behind the times at this point, which wouldn't surprise me because that's typical for companies in general. It could be him trying something new, basically. It could be him saying, well, okay, this is a market. And it is. Freemium stuff makes way too much money. So let's try it. Let's try to make something within this market. Let's see if it works. Lord knows that Square Enix has actually been making a unfortunately large amount of money on Record Keeper, Exvius, and the one I can't remember the name of because it's stupid and terrible. And yeah, now see, here's the thing. As Zoen points out, it is possible to do freemium properly. We have seen free-to-pay microtransactions done properly. It's pretty rare, but it has happened. If they do it well, if they do it all right, okay. You know, if they pull this off, Mobius, thank you. If they pull this off, okay. But anyways, yeah, with regards to Mobius, Exvius, and Record Keeper, they could have been looking at those three and saying, well, those are making tons of money, because they are. Why don't I try one of those? I mean, if fans of the Final Fantasy series like that, I could try something like that. That is effectively my market, too, right? My second theory is that this is him saying, flinging his hands up in the air and saying, screw it. And the company, either him or the company itself being like, yeah, no, we're gonna do this and we're gonna make this work because that's what you do nowadays. You make freemium stuff. We are a service industry. We don't make games. I don't actually have much else to say about this particular topic. There's too little information to do any more than wild speculation on. But announcing the new... I was actually kind of excited. You know, he had his whole, I'm going to do an announcement on X date thing. I'm like, woo! And then, yeah, freemium. Speaking of freemium, though, I want to talk about another concept. That's right, I'm starting to segue these lore weeks. Oh, yeah. Getting super high with our production values. Oh, yeah, by the way, actually, I just want to cover this really quick. Especially if Zagoten's on, because that'd be awesome. I would love to make the kind of money to hire an editor to help edit my stuff, because editing takes such a stupid amount of time and gets in the way of the rest of my job. But obviously that's not really feasible, because I don't even make enough money to have my own place to live. Nevertheless, I bring that up because one of the most consistent complaints I hear is that my show isn't edited enough. Let me make this very clear. I don't want to become one of those jump cut people. I can't stand that. I actually asked you guys if you wanted me to do that once upon a time, and you guys said no. I was willing to put up with it, but you guys said no. So I don't like it, and you don't like it. Pretty definitive. But there's another thing that I want to mention, because I don't want people to think I'm just resting on my laurels on this one. One thing I've been doing a lot lately is trying to put more prep work into it and trying to prep myself more into it so that my presentation, live, which is my style, is better. I encourage all of you, and I mean this with total sincerity, to watch the Babylon 5 Rumination, which will be going live in August. I forget the exact date, which is season 4, episode 22, a Deconstruction of Falling Stars is the name of the episode. I mention this because I basically really feel like I've kind of done really well on that one with regards to how I present myself, because that's what I'm trying to be better about. I'm trying to make the flow of my discussion more logical. I'm trying to make it more presentable. I'm trying to improve my presentation rather than relying on doing this and chopping out the second or so as I check my notes. Moving on. I want to talk about things that are good on paper and bad in execution. Now, this is kind of a weird topic because there's no like hard and set rules for what is going to be something that works or doesn't. And it usually depends on a myriad of circumstances, which I can't even begin to summarize. But I do have two specific examples of games I wanted to talk about that are good on paper, and the kind of things that you'd think just looking at it on, like, if you describe the game, it's like, oh, that sounds awesome. That didn't work for me. The first I want to talk about is a game called Aetherlords 2 that I actually explored just last Friday. On paper, top-down, like RPG, MTG-style game sounds awesome to me. With a campaign mode, with a story mode and everything, that's the kind of thing that on paper sounds like awesome to me. I was bored silly going through Aetherlords 2. Like, I was trying really hard to get into it, and it's just, yep, okay, so I'll do this, and I'll do this. And it's hard to specifically mention the why. Like, I tried really hard to wrap my brain around why it just wasn't engaging. Because, again, on paper, it sounds like a great idea, right? I actually have an example to show you for this. It's a phone game that just came across my radar very recently. Is it really? Hang on just a second. Did I lose the sound? Oh my god. One second. There we go. Okay, so this is a game called Star Trek The Wrath of Gems, because it had to be the stupidest possible name. Now, I'm just going to play this game really quick, and let's see if you pick up on it. So we'll do story mode, next generation, because that's what I started here. And we'll do the Survivor, which looks like that's a diplomatic mission? Yes. Why are we taking Worf to a diplomatic mission? That sounds like a terrible idea. Let's take Data. Wow, Data's actually even worse. Let's take Troy. Oh my god, Troy's even worse. Okay, Worf it is. Yes, I know. So this is how the game does its cutscenes. Don't worry, it has a skip button. There is actually a skip button. So this is the gameplay. Now there's actually 3 modes, but as you can see it's a Connect 3. The core gameplay is a Connect 3. So I want yellows, reds, and blues. That's on the left side for the diplomatic mission. I actually can't yet, so one. I have to unlock it, believe it or not. So, reds, yellows, and blues. We'll do a yellow there. No, I don't want an orange, you moron. Shoot, I may have to accept an orange. By the way, I'm not good at Connect 3s. I also don't like Connect 3 games in general, so whatever. I'll do that one. Screw it. That's just... Oh, God, we actually ran out of possible moves. No wonder. Whatever. It's okay, I'm about to lose, guys. and then it'll be over. I'm not really trying at all. I just want to demonstrate something. Hang on. Come on, lose. Lose. There we go. Okay, I lost. I lose. Oh no. Okay, so now that's the diplomatic game mode. There's also the ground-based game mode. Oh, hang on, let me heal. There we go. So, we land on the planet, and there's duplicates of us here. And by us, I mean them. Let's summarize the story really quick. So, we have to fight them. And, of course, by duplicates of us, I mean duplicate of Worf. Even though Geordi was... You know, never mind, let's just not go into it. So, okay. If I match blue, purple, orange, yellow, or red, Worf attacks. Worf also can fill his bar with reds or white, yellows, excuse me. If I match a white, Data can attack, and if I match full at white, he gets a special attack. You can kind of see where this is going, basically. I'm actually not going to do this mission, so let's just leave this one. Dun, dun. No, I would not like to try again. Thanks. Thanks, that's cool. One other map mode, which I just want to show off real quick, don't worry. As you might imagine, it's space combat. This one's actually probably the one that's most serviceable. Red is high damage, green is low damage, white is shields, everything else is dependent on your setup, which I'll talk about in just a second. In my case, I need orange to do my special attack, which is a quantum torpedo. Yes, I need to keel from the conversation. Now, I've actually leveled my ship a little bit because I've played this for about 15 minutes. So, God, I guess. And, wow, those are not great options. I guess I can't do anything good, so I'll just do that. I don't need shields. Well, what's funny, Takoida, is I thought the exact same thing. Except it's worse, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Die, Cardassian scum! Anyways, I'm just gonna... leave? Can I not leave the map? Seriously, can I not leave the map? There, whatever, this should finish him off. Or not. Gosh darn it. Die! I actually want the Cardassian scum to die now. Come on. It's taking so long. Hang on. Here we go, here we go. This should do it, this should do it. Okay. So obviously this is a travesty. I probably don't need to explain anything about that. And there's a cutscene explaining what's going on. Okay, so there's, like I said, there's all campaign mode. There's actually multiple mission categories, campaigns, whatever you want to call it. There's original series and TNG. You level up crew by feeding other crew into them. I'm not kidding. You level up your ship by feeding other ships into it. You can adjust their stats. You know, in other words, this is basically, for those of you who have played it, and I know Takoida already got there, this is Puzzle Quest, except with a very terrible Star Trek mask over it. Now, let's go ahead and shut that down. Let's go ahead and make this point clear. This is a good idea on paper. I liked Puzzle Quest. I like the idea of having, you know, an RPG. I've talked about this. I actually talked about this with Gwent. I talked about this with Witcher 3. I love the concept of a game where you're playing through the RPG, and then all of a sudden, you know, when you go into battle, you go into, you know, like a puzzle thing or whatever. You know, some other kind of gameplay, combat mechanic, other than action RPG or turn-based RPG. I mean, it's only one step further away from what we do in the Final Fantasy series, for God's sakes, because, you know, right? So I like that concept. And again, I did like Puzzle Quest. Good idea on concept, on paper. Here's a Star Trek RPG that has a puzzle thing. Here's the problem. As you probably saw, and this is why I wanted to actually show it to you in person, it's terrible. And, I mean, we could dissect and look into the specific reasons why it's terrible, especially the fact that it's kind of bare bones, but it is still terrible. I bring this up because too many people, it's relatively easy for someone or something to come up with a good idea. I hate to say that, but it is true. It is relatively easy to come up with a good idea for just about anybody. Implementing a good idea is so much more difficult. And that therein lies the problem. And I wanted to bring this up because I feel like this is something that has been endemic in a lot of games where, in paper, yeah, I'm with it. But then, Mass Effect Andromeda, excuse me. Wow, we're already almost at an hour point. Do you want to talk about Star Wars or Star Citizen first, guys? No, I tend to agree with both Dakoita and Lurker there. Star Citizen first? I mean, we're talking about both. Oh, hang on. Now we're tied, as we always are. All right. Let's talk about Star Citizen. It is actually the next one on my list, so let's just do it in order. Okay, hang on. You're welcome, by the way. I spent about half an hour researching the Star Citizen thing leading up to this. That may not sound like a lot, but I actually read a 29-page legal banking document just to make sure I was as well versed in this one and doing my own due diligence in order to ensure that I could talk about this with as much confidence as I possibly could. In fact, I actually still have that document right here, ready to go. All right. There is a company out there called Cloud Imperium. Underneath the umbrella of that company is a company called Foundry 42. This distinction is important for reasons I will be getting to, but just remember, Foundry 42 are the people who are working on Squadron 42, the game that's likely to actually come out. I mean, I'm sorry, but Star Citizen might come out. Squadron 42 is very likely to come out. Foundry 42 Limited, company 08703814, registered in Cheshire, Britain, British company. God, where do I start? Cloud Imperium went to a company out there known as, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Coots & Co. It's one of the company houses of Britain. It's one of the major banking firms, to use a more common term, in Britain, okay? And it is a fairly large banking firm, used to handling multiple millions of dollars. Pretty simple, pretty normal. Let me go ahead and say something really quick. Banks are not investors in the typical sense of the term. Obviously, in the literal legal sense of the term, they are, in fact, investors. In fact, banks make their money off of a term I can never remember the name of, but it's a term where you lend out more money than you have. And also, you invest in... Basically, the banks are constantly investing all that money that's sitting in their accounts, that's your money, in order to try and increase it. That's how a bank functions, right? But what I mean when I say that they are not investors in the typical sense is an investor is someone who looks at a situation and says, all right, I'm going to gamble. Because let's be 100% clear, stock markets and investing on that level at that particular perspective, when most people think of investing, they think of going to the stock market and buying up shares of a company. That is gambling. Anybody who says otherwise is just plain wrong. It is gambling. Now, there are degrees of certainty when it comes to this gambling. That's why they have concepts such as low risk, which usually has low reward, or high risk, which usually has high reward. If you're paying attention, this is actually the same thing casinos do, actually. It's like, oh, yeah, you could pay the nickel slots or whatever and probably get even. Or you can go try the dollar slots or the $20 slots and win it big, Those are the ones that have the $1 million payouts, right? This is very, very common, very simple stuff. And it's very easy to understand why low risk would be low reward and high risk would be high reward. Banks don't do that. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about that specific, but that is a very important thing to remember when it comes to what happened. So, here's what actually happened. Now that I've got some preface out of the way, Cloud Imperium has reached out to the company, I can't remember how to pronounce it, CNC. They've reached out to CNC and said, we'd like to take out a loan. Now, the way most people are reporting this is Cloud Imperium has wagered all of their IP and their entire company as collateral in order to take a loan. And that's all everyone's reporting. It's just that fact right there, which is not doing due diligence, which drives me crazy, if I can just being blunt. Maybe it's just because I'm economically minded. I don't know, but that's not actually what's going on here. Cloud Imperium has actually reached out to this company in order to procure a loan for Foundry 42. Cloud Imperium is not actually... You see where this is going? Now, in order to procure this loan for Foundry 42, Cloud Imperium has put quite a bit on the table, so to speak, as leverage, as their collateral. I'm just going to list all of this because I want you to hear this word for word. There are, looks like 19 things here, so bear with me. This is all of the stuff that is going to be... if they default on the loan, this is what the bank has the legal right to claim, and I quote, all copies made or to be made of the game assets and distribution rights, any sound recordings made in the course of the production of the game or pursuant to any right acquired in connection with or arising from the production of the game, all copies made to be made of the scripts, musical scores of the game, and any sketches and designs produced in connection with the game, all digital material and sound and visual material made to be incorporated or reproduced with part of the game, any agreement for provision of goods, services, facilities, finances for the game, and the benefit of any insurance policy taken out for or in connection with the production of exploitation game, and the benefit of all revenues accruing to the chargor, that's Cloud Imperium, the chargor's order on behalf of the chargor, the accounts, including all monies standing to the credit of each account, all interest accrued on each account, and all debts represented by the foregoing. That part's important. Keep the one in the back of your mind, by the way. That's point 8. The UK tax credit collateral. The proceeds of any or all of the foregoing, which includes the benefit of licenses, consents, authorizations, statutory or otherwise, held by the chargor, again, the company, in connection with the business or in use of any of the... I'm going to skip over a little bit of this. A lot of this is just legalese. But basically, the benefit of all licenses, consents, and authorizations could be the summarization of that one. All estates or interests in the freehold... I should get music going for this. I'm sorry. There you go. All estates or interest in any freehold or leasehold property now and in the future vested in or charged to the chargor, all fixtures and fittings from time to time attached to any freehold and leasehold property, all plant and machinery of the chargor, present and future, and all associated warranties and all rents receivable for any lease granted out, all the goodwill of the chargor, present and future, all uncalled capital, present and future, all stock shares and other securities, present and future, and the benefit of any currency or interest rate swap cap or collar, or any other hedging agreement, or any other future transaction of the treasury instrument made with the chargee or third party. Now, that sounds bad, and this is probably why most people are reporting this as they're wagering the company for this loan, and that is absolutely true. That is actually what they're doing. But I wanted to go down the whole list to really emphasize what this means, because this is not just them being willing to sell the IPs to Star Citizen. These people are putting everything in the bank's pockets for this. If they default on this loan, every single person at Cloud Imperium will lose everything, legally and materially, if they default on this loan. That is another important point I want you to remember. Now, let's put these important points together, okay? Cloud Imperium has put everything on the line to get a large loan for Foundry 42 from a bank who is not an investor. You with me with all this? All these points? Too many people have been reporting this as saying, oh my god, clearly they're dying and struggling and everything's going to go horribly. Banks don't do that. Banks don't look at a company and say, oh my god, you desperately need this loan because you are desperate. Okay, here's the loan. That's not how banks work. If Cloud Imperium was on the verge of total failure and was getting this loan as a last desperate option, then they wouldn't have gotten it, especially not from a bank. That's not how that works. Because one thing most people don't understand is that you don't just walk up to a bank and get a loan. Even a person can't actually do that. You walk up to a bank and you say, I'd like a loan, and they say, okay, convince us. Because banks are not investors. Banks do safe, small risk, small reward. They just do a lot of it. That's how banks make their money. They do little nickel and diming everywhere millions of times. So in order to get a loan from a bank, especially a major firm like this bank, CNC, you need to go in and say, here's what we're doing, here's how it's going, here's how we're going to prove that we can repay this loan, here's how we can prove we're good for this. And the bank has, and this is as true as of the 15th, hang on, let me double check on that timestamp. Yes, 15th of June. As of the 15th of June, the bank has granted this loan to Foundry 42, with Cloud Imperium backing them, okay? That means that the bank looked at their books and said, yeah, okay, we're cool. Now, to put this into a little bit more of a down-to-earth perspective, I want you to picture you want to buy a car. I also want you to picture that you're younger than you are. Hear me out, okay? You want to buy a car. You don't have 15 grand lying around. At least I imagine you don't. If you do, what the hell, man? But you want to buy a car. So if you, at like, say 18 or whatever, go to the bank and say, yeah, I'd like a $15,000 car, the bank says, and then you leave without any money. Let's assume instead that you go to your parents or grandparents or whoever, go into the bank with them, and the parents say, yeah, I'll co-sign on that loan. And the parents basically put their account or their resources or whatever on the loan. Now the bank says, oh, well, I mean, this kid I'm not going to trust with anything, but you have actually put something down on the line, therefore I will actually allow this loan to go to the kid so they can buy the car. And hopefully that turns out well. But it's more likely to turn out well. And that's exactly what has happened here, just with companies instead of people. Cloud Imperium says, yeah, no, we're good for this. Buy my kid a car. And Foundry 42 now gets the loan to buy their car. What is most likely happening here is they need that capital, and this is actually intelligent, hopefully, fingers crossed, I am putting a little of this on faith, but if I was in their position, what they are doing is they are dumping this money into the development of Squadron 42 to get that game out there, to get an income revenue source for Cloud Imperium, which it desperately needs in order to be able to not only pay off these loans, but to continue the function of Star Citizen itself. Okay? Everyone on board with all this? I know this is a lot of dry stuff. Hang on. Now, I didn't see anything indicating the amount of the loans, Zawan. It's possible I missed it. This is 29 pages of legalese. I mean, seriously, this is pure on legalese. It's ridiculous. Ugh. Just, yeah. And it's possible that they don't have to release it. I'm not sure. They have to release public documents about these kind of things, which is how I'm able to look up all this stuff. But I don't know how the laws work in Britain, but over here in the States, they don't have to release certain specific info, like the amount of money. Now, in the interests of total fairness, which I do want to be totally fair about this situation, a lot of people who are freaking out about this are doing so because of the Kickstarter situation. Because, you know, they Kickstarted to make Star Citizen, and then there's some Zug-Zug, and now they're like, oh my god, why are you taking a loan when we did this, you know, when we did this whole Kickstarter thing? I want to ask you a legitimate question. I want you to picture for a moment that you've kickstarted insert game A. I don't care what it is. I mean, I do. I keep saying that today. The point, it doesn't matter what game it is as long as it's a game that's important to you. Maybe a theoretical game, right? And so you have kickstarted into this game. You and a bajillion other people, hey Ginger Ninja, have kickstarted into this game, okay? Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that that company making that game has ambitions and dreams. So while they are still working on the game you kickstarted, they set up a second company, a branch, a subsidiary. And that second company, which I'm actually looking at the company photo right now, says, we want to make another game attached to the main game. So they start making a game. Now I want you to imagine that this second company gets a loan. Well, okay, actually, let's rewind just a second. Ride to Hell Retribution 2, there you go. Perfect game. Best game ever. 10 out of 10. Now, would you rather that they divert the Kickstarter money that you put in for Game A in order to make Game B, or would you rather they seek some other method of procuring money for Game B? And this is an honest, legitimate question. I really want to know what you think about this one. And you can already understand why I'm asking this, because we know what they have done. We know what they have been doing. The finances are public record. Even if we don't know the exact numbers. That's a separate issue, the one that I don't actually want to get into. I really don't want to get into that issue. That is a completely separate issue to this. I'm also not going to give my opinion on that one. I actually didn't kickstart Star Citizen myself. I don't know why. I think it wasn't on my radar at the time. And then it ran out and I didn't get to the point. Because what we have here is a very black and white situation, believe it or not. For once, for all the complexity, for all the realities, for all the important points I said, for like the last 10 minutes of me talking about the finances of the situation, we are now at a coin flip situation. That is what's been engineered. If Squadron 42 succeeds, we're good. That's really all it comes down to. I don't mean critically succeeds. It needs to financially succeed. But if Squadron 42 succeeds, then we're good. If it fails, then we're not. And there is an extremely good chance that we will actually lose Star Citizen if Squadron 42 is not good. I don't know what's going on in the minds of the people making these decisions. The people who are actually the executives, CEO, etc. of Cloud Imperium, the people who are deciding this stuff. But I feel like, based on everything I've seen from the developers and from the news announcements, from everything I've seen from the Star Citizen people, what I think is going on here is that these people are extremely ambitious for better or good, or for good or better or worse, excuse me, for good or for bad, and think they can pull this off, and are, as was mentioned earlier in chat, are just going all in. Yeah, we got this. Bloop. We will totally make Squadron 42 a success. We just need that money now, and when we do, we'll pay off the loan, and then we'll finish off Star Citizen. Boom. I'm the wrong person to ask, Tech. I haven't played FF14 since it came out, basically. So, that is what I think is happening. That is pure opinion, what I just said. Because I don't actually know what's going on in the minds of the people making these decisions. All I can do is presume based on how they've been presenting themselves. There's an interview that came out, I think a couple of years ago at this point now, where the guys who were making Star Citizen were like, oh my god, we could have made a good game with, the amount we were asking for, which is like 10 million or whatever, but we got 140 million, so we're totally going to make the most amazing game ever. Their policy has been all in this entire time. But again, I wanted to do a full report on this situation because too many people are misreporting this situation, and that bothers me. Due diligence, it's a thing. I am guilty of not doing it as well. I'm trying really, really, really hard to not do that anymore. Squadron 42... Someone else will tell you, someone. Let's talk about Star Wars. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. Da-na-na-na. So Star Wars is a series you might have heard of. They're coming out with a Han Solo movie. I don't know if you've heard of this. I really don't. I actually know some friends who didn't realize they were making, and are in fact almost done with making, a Star Wars Han Solo Gaiden movie. So they're making a Han Solo movie. Now, I have heard this situation misreported as well. It's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this one. the most common way this particular issue is being misreported is directors leave project, Han Solo doomed. Let's go ahead and talk about the situation for real. Now, they got the Lego movie duo to do this film, and I actually don't remember their names right now. I actually kept this up so I could look at their friggin' names. Lord and Miller, that's them. Lord and Miller are the directing duo who were past tense working on Star Wars Han Solo. Now, the two of them are, in my opinion, excellent directors. They have a very good track record of taking something that shouldn't work and making it work. Cool. And this, oh, by the way, this is a prequel movie for those who are not aware of the situations. No spoilers or anything, this is just before A New Hope. So they were brought on, and in fact, Lawrence Kasdan, the guy who's writing it, by the way, Lawrence Kasdan is one of the people who actually worked very hard to bring this duo in to direct the movie. That's actually an important point for later. I know I keep doing this important point thing, but just keep it in the back of your mind, okay? Now, a lot of people were hesitant about the two of them coming in, but... well, hang on, Goldberg. When Han was in the Academy... Actually, I don't know a lot of specifics, but I was going to say, I'm pretty sure this is during the Rebels series in terms of timeline. Especially since the AU has been focusing very hard on that strong continuity thing. Anyways, so they were doing their particular style of thing, which lends itself towards a lot of improv, which lends itself towards an overall comedic tone. I mean, you've seen the Lego movie, right? But they wanted to still have it be a meaningful, significant movie with comedic significance, right? That's their style. That's what they do. Again, the Lego movie. Like, if you've seen the Lego movie, you know these guys' style. And they were presenting the film in such a manner. What happened is let me go ahead and preface this by saying that we don't know the 100% truth of exactly why, where, who, and what. But we do know that Alden, I don't know how to pronounce his name, is the guy who basically started this. He's the guy playing Han Solo. And he is really throwing himself into the role. He really wants to do a good movie, which is great. And he apparently started raising issues about the situation, both on social media and with regards to the other executive board. Most notably to, I don't remember her name. What's her name? Hang on. Kathleen Kennedy, who is the current president of Lucasfilm and is the one who's been heading up this particular project. So he went to her and was like, okay, look, I have issues with this. I have issues with how this is going. I have issues with this presentation. Insults were levied. I'm not going to repeat them. But there were absolutely insults that were levied by him towards them. So then they sat down and they did what is very, very normal for films to do. They were done filming, basically. And obviously there's still late film stuff. The second unit is probably still doing work, but the main core chunk of the character scenes is done, so they sit down, they start editing together. And according to multiple sources, the scenes didn't work really well together, okay? Shrug. So what they decided to do was reshoot a couple of scenes that were in the main narrative to make the overall flow from scene to scene work better. Again, I want to stress that all of this is actually very normal and ordinary. This is actually what most movies do every time a movie is made, okay? However, what happened was that Lord and Miller went to Kathleen Kennedy, the president of Lucasfilm, and said, we want to oversee this. We want to oversee the reshooting and the re-editing of our project, and this song shouldn't be playing. Hang on. There we go. That's a good one. They wanted to be the guys in the box. Now, this is also not particularly unusual. I'd say at about 50% of the time, a major director or directors will be involved in the editing process and still direct while the editing is going on, right? Just to use an example right off the top of my head, Peter Jackson is someone who has always been very hands-on when it comes to the editing phase of his movies. He wants to be right there in the editing booth with the editing team, right alongside with them, making sure that whatever they're doing conforms to whatever he wants in his head. Makes sense, right? Not all directors do that. Some directors are hands-off. So Lord Miller said, we want to be involved in this. We want to be up there with the reshoots and with the editing. They said no. And again, this is one of those situations where I have to remind you that we don't know the total reality of what happened. All we know is that they wanted to be involved, they were disallowed, they were shown the door. As in, they're off the project. We don't know if they quit. We don't know if they were fired. We don't know if this was one of those amicable partings, because that happens too, believe it or not. We don't know if there was something heated, or maybe they insisted on something they didn't want to do. Something, somewhere along the line, went wrong, and the two directors left. Ron Howard has been brought in order to supervise the editing and the reshoots of the main scenes, which, again, is basically just the cleaning up after the main movie has been already done. So that's the story right there. Let's just stop there for a second. That is the story as is. Okay? We with it? And yeah, as Luxia says, I've actually already seen conflicting reports on this one. Again, due diligence. I've actually seen Lord and Miller both talk about this. I've seen Kennedy talk about this. I have seen Alden, the guy playing Han Solo, talk about this. And I've seen Kasdan, the guy writing it, Lawrence Kasdan, talk about this. And several of them have actually been completely disagreeing with each other on their stories of what's happening already. And this basically just happened. And we're already having conflicting stories. So I really have no idea the specific truth of what is actually happening. All we know for absolute certainty, Kasdan brought the duo in. They were mostly done and had reached the editing and possible reshoot phase. There were some conflicts that were brought up by the main star. They wanted to be in charge of the editing process, and now they're not working there anymore because they were told no. Those are the facts right there. Everything else, not really sure about it. So, yeah. Now, yeah, there might literally be just some human memory going on here. I don't actually know. I really don't know. Now, let's go ahead and discuss reality. There are, in my opinion, two general categories of what could happen as a result of this. Category one is that they'll do the reshoots and re-edit the sequences, and then the movie comes out next year as planned, and whether it's good or not is not even part of the equation, but that will be what will happen. And Ron Howard will be the one on deck, part of the reshoots and part of the redirecting. I mean, if nothing else, Ron Howard is one of the most famously easy to get along with people in Hollywood, so I imagine that will just go smooth as butter. Second possibility, and I don't want to sound alarmist, but in the interest of total honesty and fairness, this is a genuine possibility. The second possibility is that they will go back to base. They'll go back to the whiteboard, basically, and say, hang on, we got to redo it. We got to redo it. It was too comedic, or it was too whatever. Whatever it is they didn't like about it, we want to redo it. Kennedy has actually stated, whether this is true or not, who knows, that she's okay with a complete revamp at this point. She's also stated that the movie is still planned to be coming out next year as scheduled. Those two facts don't really agree with each other, so make of that what you will. But if they actually go back and completely redo this, the movie will absolutely be delayed, and who knows if it will be better or worse as a consequence. We probably won't even know the truth of that for years after the movie comes out, because that's the nature of that. But I wanted to really sit down and discuss the realities, the facts, and the conjecture, rather than just being like, oh my god, the movie's doomed, like most people are doing. Yes, May next year, I'm pretty sure. I can look that up real quick. Hang on. I'm not capable of answering Gary's question. Someone answer Gary's question real quick. Yep, May 25th, 2018 is the release date for the Untitled Han Solo film. They don't even have a frickin'... whatever. By the way, if you just Google Han Solo movie, you get a bunch of these kind of things that I'm talking about here, with people just being like, "Rah!" and misreporting all over the place, as is likely to do. Now, if you asked me what I think is most likely to happen, I think what is most likely is the former category that I mentioned. I think it is most likely that Ron Howard will be brought in, reshoot a couple of specific scenes, which again is normal, resplice them together to make a more consistent tone, again, normal, and then the movie comes out. That is what I think is most likely. Whether that will make the movie better or worse, I don't know. I will say this, by the way, thanks to the way things work, we do already have what is effectively the original film done. Like, the film that was originally put forth by Lord and Miller has been completed. They just need to edit it together, right? So there is actually a possibility that we will see what is a different version, a director's cut, if you will, of that version come out. This would also not be the first time this has happened. Probably my personal favorite example of a director's cut that is almost entirely different in tone and presentation than the theater cut is Chronicles of Riddick, which when I first saw the director's cut of that, I actually had to remind myself that I was watching the same film. So, we'll see. Either way, I think I've actually covered everything. My God, we had a lot to talk about this week. Like I said, we had some big issues to talk about, which is why I wanted to get into it. Yes, the Superman 2 cut is another excellent example of the completely different original cut. Let me check my other... I actually have multiple notes now for Loreweek, because, due diligence and all that. I should explain that really quick. Due diligence is not just a buzzword. Due diligence means taking the time to try and make sure that what you're saying is as accurate as possible. That's what that means. And again, I don't always succeed at that, especially when it comes to ruminations. Or rather, I should be more clear, my old ruminations when I didn't do due diligence, which is one of the reasons why I want to delete so many of my old ruminations, because they're crap. I haven't decided if I'm going to do that yet or not, but I'm certainly thinking about it. I guess that's actually it then. Having looked at my notes here, just making sure. I already talked about that. Yep, okay. I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording. So for those of you watching at Loreweek,